Okay, go ahead. Let's say who's here. Yes.
Sean Scully, Washington Gas.
Mark Battle, Pepco.
Ted Treyeu, DC Sustainable Energy Utility.
Teresa Lawrence, DOEE.
Millie Knowlton, representing the building construction industry.
Sandra Madison Fry, People's Council.
Great. And on the phone, please, could we start with board members? See if we got a quorum.
Yeah, this is John Misrock, Vicky.
Yeah. And I know Nicole is joining and Lynn is coming late. Maybe we don't have one yet. Who's saying are we able? If Mark is sitting in for Donna, does that count for us for quorum purposes?
Let me check.
Well, anyway, all we would be voting on for the moment would be the agenda and the minutes. Who else is on the phone, please?
Hey, this is Nicole from Grid. I just joined.
Okay, great.
It says the member from the electric company. It doesn't say or designee, so issue there.
The what?
It doesn't say or designee.
Okay, but we don't yet have, so maybe we'll let him join. Okay, thank you. Who else, please, is on the phone? Okay, should we go around the room?
This is Salil Gauki with Ecometry, part of the NMRT on the call.
I'm sorry, from where?
Out of the NMR group.
Salil Gauki with Ecometry, we're on the NMRT.
Okay, thank you. Welcome. Let's go around the room and say who we are.
Marshall Walking, Department of Energy and Mars.
This is Patty Boyd, PCSU.
Marcus Walker, UCSC.
Adrian Merton Henderson. Angela Johnson. Cheryl Dove, PCSU.
Yeah. Yes.
DeLapro with DOE.
Yeah.
Great.
You have 2 vacancies, so 6 should be a quorum.
Oh, okay. Well, we got one. Good. Okay. Then we can, in fact, approve the agenda. I was just going to say in the old and new matters, there's been several pieces of legislation introduced recently. I don't know if you guys are able to speak about them, but like the NWA, one thing for NWA. At some point, it might be helpful for us to do like a little
let me see if Mark. I'll check to see if Mark is available.
Okay, that'd be helpful if he knows. Thank you. Anyone have anything? Oh, and I was also going to say that the audit team, you sent the audit around. I didn't know if anybody wanted to discuss any of that, but it wasn't on the agenda. So maybe we'll just select to leave time if anybody has anything on that. Anybody have anything else on the agenda? Okay. Somebody want to move to approve the agenda?
I move to approve.
Thank you. Anybody second?
I will second these.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Thank you. Anyone opposed? Okay. Thanks. Okay, let's go to the minutes. Did anyone have anything on the minutes? Oh, I'm sorry, backing up a second. Also, I think the Q2 report also wasn't on the agenda. I don't know if anybody wants to discuss that. But there were just the things that came in between. We didn't want to just take some time to discuss if anybody had any comments. I had one question from the minutes, but not a comment on the minutes, which was that it said that 2 modifications, contract modifications, was coming our way shortly after the last meeting. One adding the $375,000 dam revenue contract, the other adding funds for the from the Solar for All initiative. Are those in fact coming our way?
Contract amendments.
Oh, we are not yet at a position to share the actual document. We're still talking about it. So I think the update we gave is that what we were intending to do, they have not been executed, or we're not at the stage of moving forward with that as yet. Okay. So we do intend to bring it back before the board before they're executed. We're not there yet.
Okay.
In developing them.
Thank you. Okay. Did anybody have any other comments on the minute? Hearing none. What would you like to do?
I second well, I move that minutes be accepted.
Thank you. And would somebody like to second?
I will second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Anyone opposed? Okay, the minutes are approved. I think that means that you're up. And
Thank you. Madam Chair and members of the board, good morning. Guests, good morning. Council, welcome back. Today we'd like to do two things with the time that we've been allotted on the agenda. This first chart, and we won't blow your eyes out with it, has been put in your packet so that you can really see it much better. And then we're going to go over the numbers, where we are roughly at about a little bit past the mid-year point in our fiscal year. So we'll show you these numbers and we'll give you a compare and contrast of where we were at about the same time last year, so you can see progress year over year as we've been moving forward. So I'll go through those numbers and make about 5 points on this chart. I won't take a lot of time with these because we really want to reserve the bulk of our time for a discussion about the low-income benchmark. We know this has been on the advisory board's mind for about the last 2 or 3 meetings at least, and we wanted to give you a very thorough presentation by Patty Boyd, who has put this together for us to talk about the old benchmark, the new benchmark, and how our work is quite different under the new benchmark than it was under the old one. First, let's dive into these numbers a little bit. Let me make just a few points about this. The column on the far right that we designed here shows you where we were at about this time 365 days ago, roughly a year ago. As you can see, and what we've done is put these numbers up here for our electric savings, our gas savings, our low-income budget, where we were in FY17, and then you'll see the numbers on the left show where we are in FY18. And we put these as a percentage towards the maximum target for each one of the respective benchmarks. Thanks. Was this phase 3 of your construction over here?
It's 4.
Phase 4, okay. Out of how many?
4. This is the last phase of our remodel.
Okay. So as you can see in the very top box on the right, about a year ago on our electric savings, we were roughly 19% towards hitting the maximum target for the electric savings. This year is, if you'll look at this column, which is percentage to max right in here, we're at about 63% of the maximum target. Again, about a little over halfway through the year. So you can see a significant ramp up in our ability to get towards these targets much faster than we did in the prior year. Similarly with the gas savings target, which is on the second line there, we were about 18% of the way towards the gas saving target a year ago. Right now we're about 43% of the way towards hitting that maximum target. So again, you can see year over year, good progress towards hitting the targets much earlier in the year. If you'll come down to this column here, which talks about our low-income budget and spend, I've been talking about this for the last 3 meetings, saying this is a number that I know is very low, and we're behind on the number. If you looked at this, we were 28% of the way towards the max at this point last year. This year, we're only 12% of the way towards the max. But remember, I've been talking about this probably since January or February. We launched a new low-income program. Patrice, stand up. I want to talk about Patrice Brooks, who is running this program for us, a star on our staff. Thank her for coming over this morning. We received 40 or so, 45? 47, thank you, my numbers are bad sometimes. 47 applications for work in the low-income space. We have issued 16 work orders as of close of business yesterday. A lot more work orders are going out in the somewhat near future. As we speak, okay, since you're sitting here, we're going out later today. But again, ramping up the work that we've been talking about for the last few months in this space. And so you will start to see these numbers on the low income spend side as well as low income savings side. As these projects are closed and inspected and everything, you'll start to see those numbers rise quite a bit over the next few months.
Ted, you said 16 new programs?
16 work orders,
Work
not programs. A work order is a project.
I know.
Yeah. That's one program. 16 different projects.
So how have you achieved such a high percentage of the electric and gas savings to date with such a low expenditure number?
This is only in the low income side of our expenditures. Remember, about 10%, the goal, the metric here is about 10% of our overall savings will come out of our low income spend. You've got 90% of the savings occurring in.
I think she's referring to electric and.
But this is just low income electric and gas savings.
No,
Okay.
those at the top are
Okay.
total savings. Yeah, program inclusive of low income.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then I will ask the question, how have you achieved so much greater savings over last year? What have you done differently in electric and gas?
Stronger program participation, pipeline that we've been able to build for a year and a half now, really turning into projects. We have some projects like our business energy rebates program, which are quite frankly already exhausting budget more rapidly than expected. The big difference is having a multi-year contract where we're not ramping up programs and then bringing them back down at the end of the fiscal year. There's a smooth transition now from year to year, and that, I think, Madam People's Counsel, has been the biggest difference between what you saw in 17 and what you're seeing in 18.
Okay, so these were at a point in time, the same point in time, the contrast between 17 and 18.
Roughly looking back,
April,
if I had done this presentation a year ago.
Right. So that last year you ramped up at the end so that there was more activity at the end.
There was a lot more expenditures in the final quarter of fiscal year 17.
The benchmark was lowered, wasn't it, from 1% savings to an amount less than 1%?
In the 5-year contract, it averages out to be 5% over the 5 years. So the numbers are a little bit lower on the first couple of years and they ramp up towards the year 3, 4, and 5.
So I guess my question is the ability to have gotten so much closer to the benchmark at this point in part because it's a lower benchmark or I guess the flip side is, can it be raised? Can the benchmark be raised in this year?
Or the benchmarks for 17 and 18 were roughly identical. Yeah, they were identical.
Yeah. I think when you see the out years for 19, 20, and 20, you'll see where they spike up tremendously.
Exponentially.
Yeah.
Actually, in the low-income benchmark presentation, where I derived the way we calculated the low-income benchmark, you can see the electric savings graph and the gas savings graph, so you can see it.
I think what you were saying is like, so the max target for the gas savings last year at 18, if you were 18%, 499,000, that would mean essentially the max target last year was 2.5 million grams, right? Roughly. If you were 18% towards the max, meaning there's just a different percentage is one thing, so like that overall.
We still hit the max last year, but we were only 18% of the way there at this point.
Yeah, I think also something to note, the reason why we're doing so much better this year at this point in time is because pipeline that we built, pipeline projects that we built in the latter half of this year are there now that we're able to take care of. So the opportunities that we found in 17 we're actually converting in So that,
How did the maxes
Yeah,
compare?
that's what I think
Max,
Sean
yeah.
and
Yeah.
The maxes are the same for the first 4 years for gas,
Okay.
and then they spike up.
And for electric?
For electric, they're the same for the first 2 years, then they go up again for 2 more years, and then they spike again. And this is in your.
Okay, thank you.
Another thing that we probably add is the fact that we didn't have a contract going with, or government was shut down in October. There was a few times where we couldn't really start going in October, where we would have liked to, and then we turn into the holidays. That kind of slows things down, and then start picking up. But this time we were able to start the projects in October.
So your gas max last year was 1.7 million as well. So that would mean the 499,000 would be about 30% towards the max.
443,000 is only low income.
No, I'm saying the gas on your FY17 April.
Yes.
At 499,000, it would be of 1.7 million. So it says 18% towards the max.
right, so
That should be 30% towards the max.
So last year, so what you're looking at are the percentages based against option year 6 of the contract. Okay, so last year we didn't ratify that contract, I think until like April 5th. So what we reported out to this board this time last year was I think the max was like 273,000 MCF, and so it was 18% of that, not 80% of those current goals.
Okay. All right.
And so you don't break out the total electric savings and gas savings for that correspond to the low income expenditures.
Not here, but we will.
Okay, and that's
Well,
a change
there's low
to
income
this.
savings. There's a low income savings line at 4,192. That's a cumulative MMBTU, where megawatt hours are converted to MMBTU, thirds are converted to MMBTU, and that is what it's totaling right now. So we are 9% to the max there right now in MMBTU.
And I'm sorry, is the 9% of the formula 10% of the total spend or 20% of the total spend? Is it, what's the 9% out of?
So if you go onto here, and I'll talk about it, but
Okay, sorry.
it's, the spend is a minimum of 20% of SETF.
So is the 9% out of
Out of the
20%?
towards the 20%.
Thank you.
And the 20% number is that max target, which really is a max and a min. We must hit that target to get any sort of performance bonus. So it's the minimum.
And that's what I said, in the second half of the discussion, you'll have
Okay.
a detailed breakdown of exactly how we
Thank you.
get to this point. The third point I wanted to make was, in our green jobs tracking here, again, we're at about halfway through the year and we're tracking at 44 jobs. The max there is 88 jobs, so you can see right at about right where it should be, about 50% of the way towards the maximum for green jobs. And finally, the CBE spend number, which is down here towards the lower part of your chart. Again, low at this point, but as I've said for the last couple of board meetings, a lot of that CBE spend is wrapped up in the program that Patrice is running, where we've issued 16 work orders and we'll be issuing more over the coming days. And so you'll see that CBE spend again start ramping up as those projects are closed and we start calculating those numbers. So those were really the main points I wanted to make on this chart here. Again, this is something that we pretty much show you guys at every meeting of the board. And wanted to the next slide, if you will, just gives you some more general updates of where things are with the organization. We talked about the CBE spend and low income spend in this what we call IQ, Income Qualified Efficiency Program, IQEF, that Patrice is running over there. Our leveraging, we want to thank the Department of Energy and Environment for approving our opportunity fund. Hopefully we will see some revenue start to come into that very, very soon and raise the amount of money we've been able to leverage into the organization. And I circulated something yesterday that came up as a press release that I circulated to the board yesterday. This is another article that came out in the news fairly recently about a groundbreaking, and I want to thank Director Wells and the mayor, and Chairman Kane was over at the groundbreaking as well last week. Dr. Lawrence was there, and a few people from DOEE. A very, very exciting multi-family comprehensive renovation with solar on the roof, efficient appliances inside, lighting, 303 affordable units. And one of the beautiful things about this project was that when we started working on this project, there were so many other multifamily low-income buildings in the neighborhood who saw what we were doing at the first one, and they said, hey, can we get some of those, some of those upgrades as well? And so we're really working in that community very, very strongly right now. This is straight out South Capitol Street, and then go to about 49th and take a right and cut up into the community about half a mile.
That's terrific.
But yeah.
The contagion.
Yeah, it really was. It really was. We started with some outdoor lighting at one of the multifamily buildings, and clearly, the safety enhancements alone, above and beyond the energy efficiency work that was done there, but the safety aspects of it alone, all of the other building owners, and not all of these buildings are owned by the same owners. They called us up and said, we'd like that as well, and so it was a great way to, start spreading some of our work throughout that community.
Can I ask, could you give us a sense to how a project of this scale, how that squares or how that fits with achieving the benchmarks? Like, what does this do to ratchet you up towards a percentage of the min or max?
This one project alone? What would it do towards our?
I'm just curious. I'm just trying to visualize, like, what does it do?
We definitely have the numbers, but I don't have them.
Okay, just have a sense of it.
It's a great question.
I mean, probably 330 units at probably 5 MMBTUs a unit is maybe 1,500 MMBTUs, maybe, and our goal is
small.
1.7 million.
So that's just helpful.
We're just incentivizing measures.
Yeah, we're incentivizing.
To a higher level of efficiency. We're not buying them outright.
Oh, right, and I'm not criticizing. I'm just trying to get for us a sense, like a real life sense.
What does a project like this mean to your benchmark?
Yeah.
That's kind of just give us
In terms of savings, this is where something with impact costs a lot of money, and so the savings are relatively less great as another project where we just do common area lighting and that's it. We get in, we get out. But if you're changing air conditioning systems in people's houses, that's expensive, and the savings are kind of small.
So that's where maybe towards the EM&B kind of a discussion, but it's an important impact in the low-income community, and it may help with things like reducing asthma or hypertension issues that aren't necessarily captured, even if the energy savings are just great. There's still big bang for the buck.
And I'm definitely going to talk about that idea, that concept.
Great.
Yeah, this is Betty Ann, if I could weigh in too, because I was out there. I think it's great. This project was, first of all, that it brought in the DC Housing Trust Fund, which has come under criticism, but really spent some good money there. And I was able to talk to the developer there. We want to make sure that all of the tenants there also are aware of the discount program, that we have for gas and electric, and I don't know how the water's heated there, but it's also heated by gas. So, and then we also found out some things about some interconnection difficulties they had with TEPCO, which will be very helpful to us in our interconnection project. But it was bringing all those agencies together, and it was such a visible thing with all the panels, physically the way the complex is driving up 3rd Street there, 3rd Street Southeast, you could just see the array of solar on all of the roofs. It was just great visibility for us. And there are probably a lot of benefits from it that just don't get measured because they're candidates getting more people into the discount program, reducing crime, making all the tenants more aware of energy efficiency, et cetera. I think it's a good model for how more districts can work together to leverage money and get a lot of stuff done. I'm very pleased.
That's great.
finally, maybe just a couple more points and then we'll turn it over to Patty. The Department of Energy had the had the Energy Star Awards ceremony a couple of Friday nights ago. Patrice again joined me at that program. We were awarded as one of the Energy Star Partners of the Year. We're very, very proud of having received that award for our work in the low-income and hard-to-reach communities. So we're really happy to have received that award. Last week, or week before last, we hosted the first training of this type in the country, we believe, on passive houses. And I know Dr. Edward Yim from DOEE joined us for the week of training. I think we had about 20 trainees come in from all over the Eastern Seaboard for this passive house training. And it was very, very successful. And we were very glad to host something like that. And I hope to see some projects come out of it as well in the not too distant future. And finally, what is the Tastemasters Hall? Because I'm not as familiar with that one as I should be, but we have it. Is it anybody?
Yeah, we converted the mayonnaise back. It's like a union market, so it's a place where all the mobile vendors can start doing selling their food out of there, but it's like a central kitchen, so they don't have to do their separate build out. So we did some energy efficiency work there. I think there's also going to be some solar power on that as well.
Where is it?
Brooklyn. Yeah, Brooklyn.
But those are just some quick updates on where we are. As I said, we wanted to reserve the bulk of our time this morning to discuss this low-income.
Hey, and Ted, I'm sorry, just to follow up on the Atlantic Gardens project in terms of our overall savings. As KWH was 474,000 KWH, and then for therms like 20,000 therms. So that's a level of
About 3,000. Our minimum target. That's a pretty good target. Is there solar?
There's solar on the roof of the building, although we didn't participate in that installation yet. But I want to introduce Patty Boyd, who's been with us for 5 years now. For those of you who have not met Patty before, Patty used to be our lead engineer, but has taken over some work a little bit differently over the last year or so, and she's going to walk us through the presentation that was in your folder this morning to talk about our low-income benchmark.
All right, thanks, Ted. Thank you, everybody. I think this is the first time I've spoken in front of the advisory board, so thanks for having me. I appreciate it. So DCSU low-income benchmark, as you guys know, there's been several iterations of the low-income benchmark and requirements for DCSU from the first contract to the second contract. So my goal here is to go ahead and on to the first slide. My goal here is to highlight the difference between the old contract and the new contract language and requirements. Explain the low-income contract modifications. We had mod 3 to the new contract, so I wanted to show exactly what those changes were and explain why those changes were made, and then discuss exactly what you were talking about: impact versus savings. And I have a table in there that really highlights what's going on in that case. So with that, does anybody have any questions on where we're going?
I assume that you're going to address the fact that the low-income savings this year are substantially less than, at this point in time, substantially less than the other benchmarks in terms of savings.
Yeah, and that's a lot with
Yep,
that's a lot with what Ted was talking. We launched a new program, and with that launching of the new program, it's taken a little bit of time to ramp up, and there's 47 applications we received for projects. So we have a lot of good savings in there, and we have another low-income custom program manager, Jules, who works with HAND and HT, different groups like that on more of a custom side, not the CBE work order implemented side. So, yeah. All right, next slide. Okay, so hopefully this isn't too messy, but it puts everything into one place. So the difference between the old and new contracts. So we have the FY12 to 16 contract, and we have the 17 to the 21 contract. So the wording of the benchmark: increase the energy efficiency and renewable energy generating capacity of low-income housing, shelters, clinics, or other buildings serving low-income residents in the district. And I want to call out there, down there, this highlight that the Clean and Affordable Energy Act was updated to include shelters, clinics, and other buildings in 2014. So that's one of the first revisions to the benchmark that we had working back in 2014. So I don't believe we worked on any shelters until 2016. We had to ramp up the way we were doing things. But now shelters, clinics, and other buildings are included in the definition. In the old contract, 30% of the Sustainable Energy Trust Fund spending annually needed to be spent on low-income programs. Now, in the new contract, it's 20% of SETF. However, in the original contract, there was no savings target, so we could kind of do what we wanted with the money. We chose always to have impact in the money that we do. But now with the savings goal added for each year, we have to be more strategic in how we spend the money. We have to, and which takes away a little bit from the impact that we could have in order to hit the savings goals. And I'll illustrate that in the table towards the end. So the savings, there was no target. And if you go back, I also called out here, the savings goal is in the appendix on how we derive it, and I can show you in a calculation, I can take you through a spreadsheet, but hopefully the illustration in the appendix is sufficient for you to see what's going on there. The income level in the original contract was 60% of area median income. Now it's 80% of area median income. Leveraged funds were not considered last time. Now they're considered. So if we can leverage funds into the low-income program, we can count whatever savings are achieved by spending those funds towards our low-income savings, but we cannot count the leveraged funds towards our spending. So that 20% of SETF, we cannot add to it or try to get to that number through leveraged funds.
So meaning in your program where you now have owners of buildings making some contribution, that would not count for
that
your
does not
spend,
count
but it
to
would
our
count
spend.
towards your leveraging.
Because in the law it says we have to spend SETF.
Yep, it has to come directly from SETF funds. And I'll get into this a little bit more, but in the prior contract, the types of projects that we worked on, and as you well know, were a lot of solar PV and solar thermal projects. We're not relying on those as much now in the new contract, right? Or not at all. And in the old contract, we did single family and multifamily residential efficiency. That's pretty much what we focused on. But now with the opening of the shelters, clinics, and other buildings, we're doing more. So we're still doing single family, multifamily, but we're also doing the shelters, clinics, energy kits that we have been providing to vulnerable communities. And it's just kind of changed our focus.
Yeah, and I think the advisory board is familiar with the energy kits that we distributed last year through the LAHI intake centers. I think if you're not, please shake your head no there. It was a kit it's a box about this big that has LED lighting in it, a faucet aerator, a power strip, and these are given to the residents as they come in to the intake center starting in October or so of each year. So we distributed a few thousand of those through the LAHI distribution centers, both the one on Taylor Street and the other one, where's it located? On Martin Luther King Avenue.
Do you know the success rate? Are people using them? Do they know how to use the
They're actually given instructions as they are picking them up. I sat in one of the distribution centers one day to watch how the distribution network. So they're given very, very specific instructions on how to use the kit and what it's all about when it's given to them.
Have you done any follow-up to see if people are using the devices in the kit?
We haven't yet.
What's in the kit?
6 LED lights, faucet aerator, and a power strip.
No, they're just the regular screw and 8 people.
What is the allocation between the residential customers, individual single family and multifamily residential customers, and the new issues, shelters, clinics, And public housing, is it?
In terms of funding or savings, I don't have the numbers directly, but there's a,
Yeah, we can kind of.
we can definitely run a report to tell you exactly that.
Because previously it was limited to single family and multifamily. Now you're splitting it among the four or three. I'd like to know what the breakdown is.
Yes, we can get that.
In the transition to the new contract, I see that there's a performance bonus on the savings. Was that an additional performance bonus, or was the performance bonus for the spending adjusted to accommodate that?
So the way that we hit that benchmark is we must spend 20%, $1 more, 50 cents more than 20% of the dollars, and then we can look at the savings to see what the performance bonus would be.
Okay,
The overall
and
bucket of money is split up between those two benchmarks.
Yeah, Ms. Knowlton, if you're asking, was there additional money put in because it's now effectively two benchmarks, the answer is no.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does the 20% of SETF spend include the performance bonus? Are you running the 20% off of that?
No.
So it's a net. You reduce the overall SETF by the bonus, potential bonus, and then you run 20% off.
Yes. You reduce the 20 million per year by the bonus amount.
By the bonus and the M&B, no, right? 'Cause it
No,
goes down
no.
to-
The E&B is on the other side of the ledger.
So there's a slide in there that takes it from the 20 million down to 18.558 million.
Okay.
And that's what the 20% is taken up. So the bonus is taken up.
So the 20% isn't the full 4 million, it's like 3.8 something.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get to that number. I was like, that didn't add up in that sense. But, so, yeah. Okay.
That answers your
Just,
question?
yeah, it does. I just wanted to make sure that that's in line with how the I guess the contract is written, not the legislation is written. There's nothing in the legislation that says the 20% at this point, right?
No, it just says there has to be a low income benchmark. And the legislation, the 20 million funding is for everything, including the bonus. So you have to use it for that.
And I guess my next question is, like, DOE runs its own weatherization assistance program, essentially. How does that interact with this? And I would assume that probably uses the 60% benchmark, 60% AMI, not 80%. Does that cause any customer confusion?
I don't know how a DOE program runs.
I can speak to that.
Okay.
Like, essentially, like, are we having parallel programs? Are they helping each other?
They are helping each other. For example, this past go around, just in recent months, we have been using the CSU rebates for energy efficiency appliances to help reduce the cost that we're putting on the table to get some of the measures done in low-income housing. And as far as eligibility is concerned, everyone that qualifies for our weatherization program, because our 60% is well below the DCSU's income level, there's no question as to whether or not they can participate in the low-income space from the DCSU. But our program managers, both the SEUs and DOE, they have regularly coordinated on several projects, especially multifamily projects, where we might go in and do an energy audit. There are certain measures that are just beyond our budget, and the SEU might be able to step in to provide some funding to help get the measures done. So it's a constant coordination and collaboration.
So the measures do the measures ever overlap in terms of like what the DCSCU is doing in terms of installed measures? And are you still doing the weatherization?
We do not have a weatherization
You
program.
now no longer have that.
The emergency heating program, we contributed funding to that on 15 projects this year.
You mean retro when the heating system goes out, full replacement?
Yes.
Sometimes it was a repair, and that we did not help with, but when it was a full replacement, we did.
Okay.
These are low-income housing.
Like 8%.
Just making sure it's not that
Right.
competition
Right.
or double dipping or whatever. We want to make sure that we're getting the max out of both programs.
It seems like also if you're combining programs, you are optimizing, the opportunities for savings. are there other programs from other agencies, like does DCRA go do some construction upgrades, or are there other opportunities where you could maximize, and would that be something to try and steer towards or give more credit for that?
It is a challenge because there are different, as like Sandra knows, I don't know if Betty Ann Kane's on, but I believe that the money that, we got Pepco too, that the money that went from Pepco Exelon merger, I think it was 11 million, is designated for low income weatherization. And so there's, 11 million is a substantial amount. So working to coordinate this is always a challenge. I do know that with the Solar for All program, we're giving money directly to some of our partners, Housing Authority and others to install. But it is a challenge, and we try to keep the SEU posted what we're doing, because we're about to probably do something with UBC and with their roofs.
So would another agency's collaboration count as leveraged funds? So in other words, not towards your spend, but towards your
leveraging goal?
achievement of
Well, projects where we help influence the energy efficiency, whether it's a custom project at a hotel or a low-income shelter, anytime we influence the efficiency, that counts towards either the low-income goal or our total goal.
Yeah, but not leveraging.
But not for savings.
It counts towards the energy savings goal, but not.
Towards the savings, right, not towards the spend, but towards the savings, that was only but it does count towards.
And
So
we're trying to,
I'm sorry. The only time that it would count is when it's a spend from a customer, a individual customer, or a non-government customer.
That doesn't count towards our leveraging spend either. Let's
nothing counts.
Let's say we went out and got a grant from the Washington Post Foundation or something like that to help with low income. Now that would count towards the leveraging goal, both financially and on the energy savings side. But these contributions here from either the building owners or another agency do not count towards our financial leveraging goal.
and they don't count
Only
towards the
the
low
energy
income leveraging, spending.
But it does increase our yield and improve our yields for savings.
On the savings side. Yep.
And it also includes
Correct.
very important that you're leveraging everyone program in order to complement it is that's the goal. Right. So that's the big win.
And we do work very closely with at least the energy side of DCRA, Dave Epley very closely, and Patrice, you and Cheryl just met with DCHA, correct? To try to
and DGS.
DGS we work very closely with. Yep.
So that seems like that would also be a nice way of trying to harmonize a lot of these cross-agency projects.
Exactly, and that's the shelters. A lot of them are DGS, and DHS runs them. All right. Good on this one? All right. So what are the contract modifications? Again, it's mod 3. And the two big changes are that we went from a floating savings goal, which was 10%, to a set savings goal. And I'll go into the how that was derived. If you have the contract with you, you can look at C48311. And it was chosen to go at 10% of FY17 maximum combined savings, okay? And again, in the appendix, I explain exactly how it's calculated using the graphs that show our minimums and maximums. And then the second one was that 20% of annual spend includes total direct costs. So that's incentives and programmatic costs. The original contract did not include programmatic costs in our calculation of total of 20% spend. So again, that's section C408312, and in order to define the total direct costs, attachment J15 was created that spells out, and I highlight. I can show you. I'll show you on a slide where I highlight the difference in text. So for example here, savings goal was changed from floating to set. So here we were at 10% floating goal. The reason why this didn't make complete sense and that we changed it is because even right now we don't know what 10% of our final savings were for FY17, and we're in the next year. So there's no real way that we could plan for 10% of a number that we don't know until the books are closed. And right now we're being evaluated on that number. You see what I mean? So having a floating target, a 10% of what number we wouldn't be able to theoretically hit. We might get lucky, but then we'll buy a lottery ticket that same day. So we changed it to a set savings target, which is 10% of the max goals for FY17. So what we do is take the megawatt hours and convert them to MMBTUs, multiplying by 3.412. We take the therms in the gas savings goal and convert that, just divide by 10, to MMBTUs. We add the electric goal in MMBTUs to the therm goal in MMBTUs, and that creates a total MMBTU that we're striving for. And again, that's in the appendix slides, and I can sit with anybody that wants to go over it. So that's the line that was changed, 10% down to that 46,556 MMBTU. All right, next one. The total direct costs defined and included in the numerator. So in the original contract, 20% of programmatic costs were not included in the numerator. They need to be included in the numerator because the people like me that work on the program, people like Patrice that work on the program, their hours that are directly billed to that program should count towards spend towards the program. So that was changed, and a definition was created in attachment J15 to define what are total programmatic costs. Total programmatic costs incurred to implement all low-income programs.
Okay, let me make certain that I understand exactly what that impact is. So previously, programmatic costs were not included in determining whether or not you met the spend.
When you say previously, are you talking about in the first contract?
Yes.
In the first
or
contract?
The measure that you have here. Is this the first contract that we're looking at?
That's the original second contract.
Second contract.
Okay, well that's
in the first contract, though, the contract from FY11 through FY16, programmatic costs were.
I see. Okay, that's helpful. So that means that in the second contract, they were taken out.
No, they weren't. No, they weren't taken
out.
Let me attempt to clarify. Okay. If you look at the language on the top, note it only speaks to what is included in the denominator, but not in the numerator. Never defined what goes into the numerator. So from an EMV standpoint, we've always interpreted that to mean full programmatic costs, including incentives, going to the numerator. What we did with this amendment is simply to clarify that understanding with which we've operated on.
Okay. So they were in fact included, but not specifically delineated in the contract.
Exactly.
Okay. So there's been no change per se.
Exactly. All we did was make it crystal clear in writing what the numerator will contain versus the denominator.
So can you also just help clarify again the difference between programmatic costs and administrative?
Can you go to the next slide? So attachment J15 outlines it. So in section 3, development of the total direct cost program expense group, direct costs are costs directly related to a single program, project, or activity. Those include, but are not limited to, direct labor, direct fringe, direct materials, equipment, subcontractors, incentives, supplies, parking, we're meeting with contractors, other direct costs, training, and travel related to program operation and delivery. So those are things we need in order to run our program.
So are there any new costs that were not previously included as a reason, implicitly included? Is there anything new?
Nope.
Okay.
I mean, I can answer that.
Okay.
And are these the same as programmatic costs?
Yes.
Yes. As compared to section 4, where we fully defined the general and administrative costs, which go in the denominator. General administrative costs, or G&A, are costs which support multiple programs. The back office costs, Examples of these costs include but are not limited to G&A labor, such as the managing director and the director of operations, their associated fringe, utilities, rent, phone, internet, postage, depreciation, repairs, maintenance, subcontractors, travel, and it goes on from there.
So it's direct and indirect. The direct cost, directly attribute a cost to an activity versus something that's allocated across multiple projects. So that's the difference between programmatic cost, somebody directly charges a program, versus, the receptionist who, supports all of the programs, that cost is indirect cost.
So these were the assumptions that we were under in the last contract. The language, we made the language more clear.
So if you're sponsoring an event specifically for the low-income program, does that ever occur, and do those costs get directly tied to the direct costs, or are they lumped into the G&A?
Was the application of the purchase something for low-income program, specifically just for the low-income program, then it would be a direct programmatic cost.
But if you're referring to the event that you participated in with the DCSCU, that would be considered a G&A cost because it's intended to highlight the SCU as a whole.
So the cap on administrative expenses apply to section 4 or to section 3?
4.
Section 4. Yeah.
And again, those have not changed.
No, they have not changed. We didn't have a specific cap in the previous contract, but all we're doing here is clearly putting a cap in and defining what those items are.
All right. Okay. So that's the contract language. So how, just to put it into simple terms, total direct costs for all low-income programs go into the numerator. Total DCSCU Sustainable Energy Trust Fund expenditures, which are total direct costs and G&A, which is the total budget that the DCSCU has to work for, go in the denominator. That number is 20% of that number is what we need to spend on low income. So our budget, once the performance bonus is taken out, is $18,558,335. If you multiply that by 20%, you get the 3711667, which you saw in the original slide that Ted showed today, which is what we're going off of. We need to spend 50 cents more than that 667 in order to have hit the spending requirement. At that point, we look at how much savings we achieved, and that's how our performance bonus is paid. Okay?
So when it went from 30% to 20%, did the denominator change at all, or have you always been going off the?
No, the denominator would never change. The denominator is always the total spending from the DCSCU perspective. What we're changing is the amount required for the numerator.
Okay. So that net, the transfer SETF funds minus the bonus and EM&B was always the denominator?
Not minus EM&B.
Not minus EM&B.
Oh, that's. Oh, okay. But minus the bonus structure first.
Yes.
Okay. Just want to know if that changed.
No.
Can I just ask? I'm sorry. I'm just going back to the change on the programmatic cost. The original language said it wouldn't be included in the numerator, right? And now it is. So I'm just going back to when you said it was always treated that way, and we're clarifying.
In the first contract. This is the original language of the second contract.
But that was what was changed.
That was what was changed.
Because in the earlier contract it was treated differently, and then the next contract came out and it was inconsistent, so the clarification was to make it with the original contract. I'm lost with it. If the programmatic costs were expressly excluded from the numerator, but now they're in it, then that is a change.
In the previous contract, we never defined what programmatic costs were. If you look throughout the previous contract, those items weren't defined. Programmatic costs or even administrative costs, none of it were defined in the previous contract.
Right, and so I think you guys were saying, but your assumption or the way you treated them was as if they were a part of the numerator.
Yes, they were.
So then the next contract came out and prohibited them from being in the numerator, and then the change was made to put them.
I wouldn't say prohibited.
weren't
It
defined.
didn't expressly allow.
Yeah.
It was unclear. It didn't.
Yeah, so
it-
it says they're included in the denominator, but it doesn't say what's in the numerator.
Yeah.
So we wanted it to be specific.
But I guess it's a drafting problem that
Yeah.
is in the initial first contract, it was explicitly delineated.
Again, when we say explicitly, we would have to go back to how do we define those terms. It was part of the issues that we dealt with. There are a lot of things in the new contract that were not clear, were very ambiguous. For example, putting in administrative costs or even programmatic costs in the numerator. Well, how do we define administrative costs? We had one interpretation, the SEU had another interpretation. We had to come to an understanding which we clearly defined in this new contract of what those actually would be. Because sitting here right now, if you were asked to define administrative costs under the previous contract, what would you be putting in that bucket? Would we put Ted's salary in there and a program manager's salary in there, or expensive for the front desk receptionist? There were no clear understanding of how those costs would be treated.
But again, purely from a drafting perspective, in the initial contract, what was delineated? What was there? First contract.
The language on the top that says programmatic administrative expenses shall be included in the denominator.
Okay, then in the second contract, the programmatic costs were not included, were not delineated. I mean, even though, I'm just saying drafting, even though those functions and services were provided and implicit in your understanding of what the cost would be. Is that correct?
Yeah, in the second contract, we clearly spelled out that we're going to put programmatic costs in the numerator and not the denominator. Because, again, I point to the last sentence, last part of that definition on the top. It says, but not the numerator, amount spent on low-income programs. Well, what is that amount spent on low-income programs? We have to come to some understanding of what that would be.
So the denominator doesn't include indirect costs, doesn't include but that basically hasn't changed. The denominator.
It has not changed.
Right.
So the numerator doesn't be
In terms of direct labor, how do you decide for people who only work a portion of their time on the low-income programs? Who makes the call of how many hours were spent? And
Charge codes. Each person, when they fill out their timesheet, like I'll put 2 hours today towards the low-income program because I was working on the low-income program for 2 hours. Patrice is running the low-income program, about 7.5 or her full day is put towards low-income.
And we follow OMB regulations, so with direct charge a program, we have to have codes set up for our program. So we charge our time, ODC, any type of cost.
No, I don't want to take away time from the other part of the presentation and the claims of yours either. I think it might be helpful for us to some point just get an understanding sort of translated into numbers, like what did it look like under the old system? What is it looking like under the new system? Just translating it for us into dollars and cents and kinds of tax, like real life examples might be helpful. Might be just walk through one or two of those and have all the language in front of us, like the old contract, the new contract before the modification, and the contract after the modification would be really helpful. Thanks.
So that said, you clearly understand what we just requested.
Not clearly from my perspective, because when we say dollars and cents, I'm thinking this slide in terms of the amount, but sounds like you want to go a little bit deeper as in how they spent the money?
I think it would be helpful to get an understanding of what was spent under the old formulation on contractors, subcontractors, as opposed to direct costs what is it looking like under the new formulation, and how does the language in the contract exemplify the way that the expenditures rolled out or will roll out?
Sort of the before and after, similar to what you did in the first chart.
Yes.
What it looked like under the first contract, what it looks like under the second
the
contract,
question-
given the same factors. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah.
One question is you want the total, or you want a breakdown of what went into I think is what Lance is asking. Is it, we can do a chart like that, we'll give totals, how much was in the previous numerator, how much was in the other, this one, whatever. But are you also asking for some numbers to be attached to how did they derive that number?
I think the numbers would be helpful to just
Which
explain
numbers?
the numbers that go towards contractor, subcontractor work as compared to the direct costs that were apparently assumed to be included
So my
under the
understanding
prior
is what the
contract
board
without
is asking,
specification.
Lance, is for the breakdown, not just the total in the chart, but just what makes up the total on the previous one and what makes up the total in the new one.
Yeah.
So both of them breakdowns.
That would be helpful.
Is that?
Yes, thank you.
It's not readily available, but the SEU certainly will have to provide that information for us in terms of.
Okay, wait a minute. You said it's not readily available.
No, because.
So Ted, and then you said the SEU may be able to provide this. I just want to get clear, but sometimes the board, it may sound simple, and then the board say, well, why didn't we get that? And I just want to make sure there's a clear exchange here.
Okay.
Well, I can point to one example why I say so, because if we talk about charge codes for people who charge directly to low-income programs, and that breakout, yes, you will need to provide that information. And when you say old and new contract, I'm not sure how far back you want to go. The old contract was 11 through 17, partially, so.
I don't know how far back I want to go either. I'm trying to follow up on what I think I heard you guys saying with regard to, because we just keep going, over this question, because the denominator numerator thing was confusing. And I think I heard you saying that there was a treatment of programmatic costs that wasn't defined under the old contract, but was treated as if it were, I think, included in the numerator.
Mm-hmm. So,
And then that was under the old contract. So you tell me which contract.
So let me take a new cut at this. I want to move DOEE out of this for a moment. This was a request, I believe, based on confusion from the SEU. And so wanted clarification, I believe, and certainty. And so is there a way to explain the period of uncertainty of why that was uncertain with actual examples versus where we are now? Is there a way to do that?
Yes. So in the previous contract, as Lance and team had pointed out, it wasn't very clear what cost or what the administrative or programmatic cost. So in the past, because he had a shared service model, he used to allocate the cost based on program participation. Now we created for this new contract, it's clear for the board as well as the which costs actually reside with those low-income programs. So we set up a new project structure where all of our shared service divisions have access to those codes to direct charge their time. So the biggest difference is in the previous contract, there was an allocation of the shared service cost based on, so if you think about EMC, they didn't directly charge for any of their work they completed with our commercial savings, same with our commercial programs, residential programs, or
Okay, rather than just doing a narrative, is there, the board is asking, unless the board decides not to ask, the board is currently asking for an example of pre
and post. We can do
and post,
numerator,
so they
denominator,
can at least visually see what's the difference in terms of impact.
So this is not like I'm stating, I'm just asking,
question. Can they just pull a sample year from before,
Yes.
the previous contract, and a sample year from now and show the differences? I think
That's
that'd be
what we
completely
want.
easy.
We don't need to do a whole accounting or
Correct.
audit.
Right. Just
going
do a
back.
sample
Just
year
the
from
example.
before and a year from now and show the differences in how the accounting is done now.
And
I
for
think that'd
just
be very easy.
Yes, thank
For a
you.
very small period of
And
time.
just for a bit more specificity, I think, like, what is spent on contractors and incentives as, and
Right.
direct costs.
Right, I think pull a sample year that
Prior
shows
and
how,
post.
programmatic costs were used before, how they are used now, and then show the differences. That way you can have how it was done previously, how it's gonna be going forward, and this is how we're doing it now. And I think that'd be
That'd be
easy and
great.
simple.
Yes, thank you.
But
With
I-
the language, that it corresponded to,
Right.
so we can see how that tracks.
I think we should have though maybe a 2-year span so that we're not pulling just a year that.
Well, I want to be careful. This is not an audit going
No.
back. What this is if you want more than one sample, we could do that. I think it would be easier. Yeah.
I think what you'll find is it's much more pure now in that you won't have overhead.
Right, but just provide the samples that will explain or show
What was the
that.
numerator, what was not.
The only problem with, and I don't think we need to go back to 2011, obviously. I think one or two, well, more than one, certainly not more than 4, because we don't want to get a year, we don't want to sample a year that doesn't represent the norm. Like, for example, when the country's already talked about, the government was down and, there was some impact on, what you were able to do. So that might affect what goes in.
That wouldn't be very explanatory if they took a year that was anomaly. I
Right,
agree
that's
with you.
my point.
So I think it's more important that they show something that's truly representative to you. Otherwise, I think I want to just be clear, you may be asking for something different. If it's an example to show the difference, or is it an example to measure the difference, those are two different things.
We're asking to show the difference?
Yes, to understand the difference.
Like a sample.
Yes, I think a representative sample.
A representative sample.
If others who are more expert can help us and say, actually, that's an outlier. The one that you
Right,
picked
exactly.
is not representative, then we can, I think, look at whether or not we look. But I'm just looking for an example.
Sample selection of
Yeah.
pre and post.
Illustrative for our purposes.
Sounds good. I think we got it.
Okay. Woo-hoo. Thank you.
All right, so can you go back just for 1 second? So I've highlighted here what the budget is we're trying to spend, what the minimum, in order to hit our minimum performance bonus, what that MMBTU number is, which is a combination of megawatts turned to MMBTU, megawatt hours turned to MMBTUs, and therms turned to MMBTUs, in the minimum setting and then the maximum setting. Is everybody okay with that? As long as, and the definition for that 3.71 we'll follow up on. Okay, so I've taken that little chart, right here, and I've put it on the next slide, right here, same thing. And so what I've done here, and I know it's kind of messy and hard to see up there, but it really helped illustrate the way we were looking at our low-income program. So on the left-hand side, I have different project types. Home performance with Energy Star, which we no longer run. Which is weatherization, typically single family, gas and electric. And I know that, going house to house to house, on average, and for this I took data from FY16 and FY17, and I saw the average cost per project was $4,155, and to the decimal point, the average savings per project was 10 MMBTUs. Okay? So our goal is minimum 23,278 MMBTUs, maximum 46,556. If we were only to do home performance with Energy Star weatherization projects, at that cost, we would need to hit the minimum goal, we'd need to do 2,328 homes, which is 200 homes a month, and spend almost $10 million. In order to hit the maximum, we'd have to do 4,656 homes, which is 400 a month, and spend $19 million. But remember, our budget is 3.711. So that's the impact. In a single-family home, you can make a huge difference to a person's, comfort level, health, utility spend, relative to what their income goals are, if you focus on those type of projects. But the savings that we can claim as the DCSU is relatively very small. So that's the main thing I wanted to highlight. And Madam Chair, when you were speaking about the impact, why don't we go house to house to house? Well, we have to do, and that's just this year. It's an annual benchmark, right? So we'd have to do 4,656 every year if we were to solely focus on that. So then, down here I put a little bit of a legend. It's not that we don't want to do single-family homes and can't include some single-family homes, but if we were to focus on it, it would be prohibited to us meeting our goals. That make sense? So red, yellow, green. It's possible to include the yellow ones. They make a lot more sense. And then green is the best option for us to hit savings goals. Again, it doesn't mean we can't do a mixture of all of them, but when you're looking at each one independently, that's how we rated them in terms of hitting our savings goals. The next one down is heat pumps, electric heat pumps. So we did several multifamily projects over the last few years. The average product cost was $230,000, which is a good amount of money. We get about 558 MMBTUs per project. So now you're getting into the project realm where, in order to hit our minimum savings goal, 42 projects. Well, Patrice, we just got 47 applications, not for heat pumps, but 47 project applications we received. That's a doable amount of projects, right, to run through our system. So that's why it's green. But still, if we were only to do heat pumps, we would need to spend, with that 558 MMBTUs, we would need to spend $9.6 million in order to hit our minimum goal. And again, in order to hit our maximum goal at 558 MMBTUs, we would need to do 83 projects and spend $20 million. I'm just going to break right there because I do the same analysis on each type of project, and I just want to make sure that it's making sense the way I set it up.
Personally, I think this is a fantastic chart, and it's really helpful to understand. And I think it's exactly the kinds of things we were talking about with the E and V. I'm the lawyer. I'm not the expert on it. It matters. So, to me, lighting is obviously cost effective.
More cost effective,
but not necessarily the biggest bang for the buck in terms of the quality of a person's life.
Correct.
And so the issue, the impact. And so there, at least in my head, the challenge is how do we translate what impact we want to try to strive for, and how we want to try to maximize the credit given for those bigger impacts.
I couldn't have said it better.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a great question at two levels. One is it'd be interesting to know how the goals that are measured annually and then over the life of the contract, how that hinders you or helps you, and for the deeper retrofits for the longer time. And then the other is that the experiences across the country, from what I've read, is that they eventually get to the low-hanging fruit and have to spend more for the deeper end projects, but you don't get as much savings of energy dollar for dollar, but yet it's something you want to do. And so that type of experience, the board here can be very helpful in kind of A, being aware of it, and B, kind of helping shape that, because it may be that at some point that the goals change in order to do it.
And think that the ability to reach the low-hanging fruit is happening somewhere else, like because of every building of LEED certified is going to happen without.
Right. You have a lot of standards that are changing as well. Building code standards are changing. That baseline changes as the years go on. The other thing is like the market change. That not just the codes, but we're seeing in other jurisdictions that you essentially lighting is becoming saturated. You're not going to get as many because we're at a very efficient point. We've incentivized a lot of that, so we've helped the market transform quicker. So if you look at this on the, you basically ranked it at $1 per MMBTU basis from top to bottom. Those bottom two, which are essentially lighting are the most cost-effective on an MMBTU basis, but very soon probably won't be even something that we could incentivize.
Correct. Yeah, and if you take an incandescent out and put an LED, they can't put their hands on the LED. And I've been in some of the houses where we've done the heat pumps, and the plumber, the contractor has fixed mold remediation issues at the same time, because they have to rebuild the structure of where that heat pump goes. They fixed wiring in a lot of cases that could be dangerous. It adds to the comfort level of people as well, which is huge impact. Where the lighting, yes, outdoor lighting, adds to safety, as we talked about at the Atlantic Gardens, and now everybody in that neighborhood wants to go do lighting. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's also helpful. But in terms of impact to people's lives and indoor air quality and things like that, the heat pumps or some sort of HVAC remediation and upgrade is a more impactful thing to focus on.
Sorry if I missed this, but the average savings is lifetime for the project?
No, we're only allowed to claim annual savings. So that would be what we would claim that year for working on that project.
So projects, say you did replaced a radiator last year, would you claim savings you would only claim 1 year of savings? So potentially you could, the light bulb will eventually need to be replaced. It might have a shorter lifespan than a radiator or a boiler. So the savings are being incorporated.
We account for the lifetime of and Tom can probably speak a little bit better to lifetime of savings. These are taken to an effect when we include our measures and upload. An LED is 6 years life, where a boiler might be 20 years life. These are all dictated in the TRM, and everybody's agreed to the lifetime. But in terms of the technical reference manual, I'm sorry.
But that doesn't go into your performance benchmark.
It does.
Yeah. It does.
It does for that year. For that year. So those savings that you saw in Ted's chart in the very beginning are this year the projects that we've closed. Maybe some. Well, I don't think we have any single-family homes, but we've done definitely lighting. That 361, that would be an average project for a year. We close that project, it goes only towards the DCSEU benchmarks for that year. Well,
and 361 is just what would be realized in that year
for an average project.
Okay, so presumably there would be 10 years of 361 per year.
So maybe you could talk to the lifetime. I don't, or we can wait.
It's fine. Yeah, certainly. Yeah, lifetime's important. She said it's part of the technical reference manual. Savings algorithms outline efficiency level. They've got other studies and other technical reference algorithms.
So we report that separately.
I think what Millie is asking, if you install one LED light bulb that is going to save 10 kilowatts a year for the next 6 years, are you counting 60 kilowatts or are you just counting 10 kilowatts?
Towards our annual benchmarks, we're just counting the 6.
The 10.
The 10.
Yes.
We might report in our annual report for a lifetime savings of, but it's not what our benchmarks, not what our performance bonuses is.
So is that something that is a contract specification that it has to be the 10? So it's like Millie's saying, if it's a lifetime savings from a radiator, maybe 200, and the lighting is 60 over the lifetime, can you weight that so that this year's reporting and credit shows you the percentage towards 200 that you accomplished as opposed to the percentage towards 60. So what you're asking.
Well, it seems like we're incentivizing not necessarily the biggest lifetime for energy savings. We're incentivizing whatever has the biggest year one savings per dollar.
That's another one of the ways that it works. Yeah.
Right.
One of the rules we're following.
And is that requirement contractual, legislative, practice?
It's practice.
So we could change that in the EM&V.
Yeah, well,
if we do, it would make us a complete outlier from the way savings in EM&V is done across the country if we just move to a lifetime energy savings. Because you're essentially giving the SU for credit for things that may not be in place 2 years from now.
Well, the other thing is the lifetime is taken into account when we do the societal cost test
Yes,
analysis.
it goes in for societal cost test, but not for the actual reductions that we want to track year over year.
So when you're judging whether or not a program is cost effective, the societal test will take into effect that like the average life, useful life of that measure, and then it all builds up to like
But do they get credit?
a program and portfolios.
There is no incentive, but they have to meet it. It's a contractual requirement that you have to meet it over the term of the contract.
But this chart is driving the actual investments that are being made, and not.
It's what when we're thinking about how we're going to invest in projects, this guide can guide our thinking. Yeah. And this again is stuff. These are 100% cost, right? So anytime we can leverage funds that doesn't go towards our leveraging benchmark, but I guess we should use a different word. When a customer is putting money towards a project and we are putting money towards a project, we're saying that's leveraging, but it's not the same as our leveraging benchmark. So it's two certain things. So for example, I think we have $2 million in projects. I'm sorry if that number's not completely correct, but 40% of that $2 million, customers are putting on the table. We're putting 60% of the dollars towards those projects.
So how does the societal cost test impact your direct investments that you're also basing on this chart?
So the projects that we invest in must screen. There's something called screening. So when we do our analysis, it has to be cost effective. The net present value has to be positive. And each one of the measures that we do, our internal database or internal tools calculate whether something screens or not. And our entire portfolio must screen.
Do any of these not screen?
It is possible to have them not screen.
Yeah.
But
some of them you can just look at it. For example, the home performance with Energy Star, if you just look at the average cost versus the savings, you're saving 10 MMBTU and you're spending $4,100. That should tell you, pretty much an instant that this would not be a cost-effective measure for you to go after, because if you were to multiply those 10 MMBTUs times, let's say, the cost of electricity or even the cost of gas, or even if you want to combine the two, you still wouldn't be able to cover the cost of the investment. You will spend several years trying to recoup that money.
so as a portfolio, the entire DCSEU portfolio must screen. It must have a large NPV, which we do. There have been projects in low income where like, well, we really need to fix that wall or whatever it is to help impact these people. That project or that measure might not screen, but as a whole, our entire low income program definitely screens.
That's pretty typical across the country in different jurisdictions. Low income programs or limited income programs are generally given a little bit more leeway in this area too, versus other programs where almost every measure has to screen positive, and the portfolio obviously therefore will be positive in terms of the NPV analysis over the average useful life of, say, that of all the measures in that portfolio. But in Maryland, Virginia, for example, we can have measures or even programs that don't pass cost effectiveness through the screening. However, the entire portfolio, because other programs are more cost effective, they basically will average out to be overall a cost effective.
And that's how ESCOs do work typically. They'll do everything, stuff that doesn't screen, and combine it with stuff that does screen, and on average, the project screens, and that's how they get financing, that's how they get their performance. It's very, you lump them together, bundle them together.
Bundle.
Yeah. That's not very much.
I want to make sure we reserve time for the end.
Go ahead to the next slide, if you could please. So we have two major categories of projects. Our two programs, the low-income comprehensive, again, that's where we work with on the right. You can see partners like NHT, ECHA, any contractor, HAND. We work a lot with the large building developers of low-income programs. It's not CBE based, it's not work order based, it's a custom incentive for work that they're doing. And then we have the low-income direct install program, which a majority of the projects going through Patrice's new effort go through that, and we do direct installation with CBE approved contractors through work orders. So those are just how we kind of bulk our projects together and how we put them, when we're claiming savings for each one of those projects or those types of that make sense? Okay. I just put straight out of the contract definitions. You can read those just so everybody knows. And then in the appendix, I calculate the savings target. I can sit with anybody or a group of people after this so we can go through how that's done. But I won't take up your time. Just know that we've thought about it a lot.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thank
you're
you.
welcome.
Thank you, Fred.
Okay, Emma.
Good morning, folks. Just want to introduce very quickly Tom Malden, the Executive Vice President for NMR Group. NMR Group will be leading the evaluation team that's undertaking the DCSEU's evaluation for FY17 programs and activities, and also taking a look at the work that they're currently doing to provide technical assistance on some of the assumptions and TRM measures that they're using. So I'll let Tom go through the
Let me
team.
jump in. Yes, so that new members, I think you already know this, but just to be sure, that for our the group that used to do this work was Tetra Tech, and they did it for a number of years, and then it was time to put it back up to bid. And so this is a new company that won the bid, and so it's no longer Tetra Tech, and that's just a context. So welcome, Tom. Glad you can join us.
Great, yeah, thank you for the opportunity for allowing me to speak and meet everyone here. I appreciate it. I do have a couple of colleagues who are hopefully still on the call. Salil Gothi from Ecometric is part of our team. I know he announced himself earlier. I think Monica Nevius from NMR and Jesse Smith from Saudi so part of our team. Hopefully they're still on the call as well. Yeah, I'm going to run through this. I know we're running a little behind, so I'll try and keep it at a high level, but certainly stop me if you have any questions. So agenda, just like to introduce you to the NMR team. As noted, we are the new EM&B contractor here. NMR is the prime, but we do have some contractors who want to introduce the companies and some of the key people in the project. Talk a little bit about our experience, and then at a high level go through the evaluation plan with a focus on this first year. It's a bit of an abbreviated schedule this year because the contracting proposal process took a little bit longer. And obviously we've got time for questions during my presentation or after. So here's a snapshot of our team. NMR Group is the prime contractor. We've got two subcontractors. Ecometric Consulting and Demand Side Analytics. We've partnered with those two firms in Pennsylvania and other states. So we've had a history of working with them. And then at the bottom, we've got Blue Path Labs and SETI. They're both local certified business enterprises. They're kind of new to our team, but we tried to select experienced contractors to help fulfill our obligations for evaluation. So I'll move on to the next slide. So in terms of our experience, we provide a lot of expertise in evaluation, impact evaluation, process evaluation, net gross. We'll talk a little bit at a high level about some of the key research areas for evaluation. We've done evaluation across the country. Currently, NMR, Ecometric, and Demand Side Analytics are working as the statewide evaluation contractor in Pennsylvania. We essentially oversee the evaluations for the individual utility in the state. NMR has been working in Massachusetts evaluation for probably 15 years. We've done residential evaluations, C&I evaluations, as well as cross-cutting projects that span across residential and C&I. Some of our team members have done work in Delaware as well, for the Delaware SEU and Delaware Natural Resources Organization. We've also done work in California, Connecticut, Efficiency Maine, Vermont. So we've got a lot of experience that we've gained from across the country. And another point I wanted to make too is that the RFP did include a study for market effects. I'll get into a little bit more detail about what that is, but we have, NMR has been a leader in market effects across the country. We've done work in California and Massachusetts. This is a snapshot of our org chart. I wanted to, in addition to introducing the organizations that are part of our team, I also wanted to talk about some of the people that you'll be hearing or interacting with. I will be the principal in charge. Greg Clendenning, one of my colleagues, will be serving as the advisor. Unfortunately, he had another commitment today and couldn't make it in. But I'll be assisted by Lauren Abraham from NMR. And then down the bottom, we've got leads assigned for some of the different research areas. Salima will be leading the gross impact evaluation, the metric. Jesse Smith from Demand Side Analytics will be leading cost effectiveness. I'll also be leading metric gross evaluation, benchmarking assessment. And then Alyssa Nyam from NMR will be advised by Monica Nubius in leading the process evaluation, market effect studies. And lastly, on the right, Jill Helfrich from BPAP will be leading the marketing effectiveness study, which will happen. This is a little snapshot of the evaluation research areas and 5-year contract period. Most of this presentation will focus on the first year evaluation, but I also want to provide a little context that we are looking at a long-term evaluation plan. These are some of the evaluation activities. As you can see, most of them will be reoccurring and repeated each year, but there are a few activities that may only occur once, or may occur a few times over that 5-year period. I also highlighted in blue those tasks that we will be conducting during this first year evaluation, and we'll get into a little bit more detail on those. So here are some of the tasks that we'll talk a little bit more detail about. Impact evaluation, process evaluation, and market effect studies. I've got subsequent slides to talk about that a little bit more. We will be conducting the impact evaluation and market effects baseline study this year. The process evaluation was planned for this year, but because the contracting process took a while, we got under contract at the end of March. And there is a desire to get the annual performance benchmarking report done as soon as possible. We've, in consultation with Lance and Marsh, we've decided to defer process evaluation until next year.
Do you mind just reminding us what a process evaluation is?
My next slide.
Okay, so thank you.
Yep. So again, these top three, I will describe a little more and talk a little bit about that. A couple other tasks this year that we will be working on include the 5-year evaluation plan. It'll build off what we presented in our proposal in terms of a long-term guidance document to help plan the evaluations over the 5-year period. Ongoing technical assistance will be setting up technical advisory group meetings with SEU and DOE to kind of have an ongoing forum for discussing evaluation issues. And then lastly, ad hoc reports or presentations. We've got more budget set aside for requests that come up. So, impact evaluation. So to your question, thinking about the high-level approach here. So impact evaluation, the goal here is to verify the energy and demand savings that are planned by the SEU. And the first task in that is gross savings verification, where we essentially are looking to assess the savings compared to prior usage. And these are used, this gross savings verification feeds into the performance benchmarks. So I think there's 6 performance benchmarks. These savings will be used to assess, for the EMV team to assess progress. So it's a key component of the evaluation every year. And so this year, given the short timeline, we have chosen to focus on impact evaluation, in particular the gross savings verification, because it's something that we can get up and running fairly quickly. We have a lot of control over get results to DOE.
May I ask a question? And this may be too long, or maybe what I'm asking is something that would take too long and put you out of the time frame for this year, but I think you heard from the discussion an issue that I think we've all been focusing on is if we may not be getting as much energy savings, but we are getting bigger impact on quality of life, which may go towards some of the non-energy benefits, or derivative. Will those be captured as well in this year's reporting, or is that something better left to methodological exploration?
Right. I think this year, our time frame, we've got a couple months to basically launch the study and report on it. So I think for this year, just because of timing, we're going to just have to focus on gross savings verification. But I understand there's interest in NEIs. I know, I think the societal cost test, I believe there's an NEI adder that's used in the cost effectiveness testing. My understanding is that that's the
Can you explain what NEI is, please?
right. So NEI or NEBs are non-energy impacts. So it could be health and safety benefits, increases in property value, utility cost savings. There's a whole host of possible NEIs that are out there, and there are. They have been studied in some areas. I know in DC they've been using an adder essentially. I think it's a 5% adder now for cost effectiveness to kind of represent that there are NEIs out there, but they haven't been quantified in DC, and there's probably a conservative estimate.
Right, and this may be more of a next year discussion than this year, but I think that some of the discussion that we've been having is that we know that the non-energy benefits were included in the prior contract, prior EM&T reporting, and that there was an adder. And again, this could be my ignorance anyway, I don't know about anybody else in the room, but it seems like it is a formula and an adder that's kind of slapped on. I'm not meaning that as a criticism, I'm saying, as opposed to maybe an understanding of specifically like what kind of people are benefiting and what are the benefits looking like. And I think that's something that we're all interested in understanding, like a more refined or maybe more specific or local understanding of what the non-energy benefits mean.
Right. And I think, we have done a fair amount of non-energy benefits work in Massachusetts. We're actually in the midst of doing a low-income multifamily study there now. So we're very familiar with the recent studies on NEIs, and we have done literature reviews before. So, one idea might be to, probably not for this year, but for next year, possibly undertake a literature review to see what NEI measurements and values have been used elsewhere, and see what could be adapted for DC, given similarity in programs, requirements, etc. There could be a possibility to do some original research on it in DC down the road, but the evaluation, the SEU runs a fair number of programs, and there's a somewhat limited evaluation budget, so we have to make choices every year about where to spend evaluation dollars. Given the focus on evaluating the progress on performance benchmarks, that tends to drive the budgeting decisions. But certainly, if there's an interest in NEIs, a lit review would be something that we could do relatively inexpensively. Original research would probably be more money, and we have to make some choices.
So maybe you'll revisit that discussion after you've got through this year.
Right.
Certainly, and we do have some room in next year's budget to do those kind of specialized studies and research. So work with the evaluate, identify what those are.
Because I know it's my interest, but I don't know about everybody else. So I think it would be helpful to have a more fulsome discussion on it.
I agree. I definitely support that.
And as I said, in Massachusetts, we've done this NEI work, and they have actually tried to quantify, some of these benefits. So, there may be some ways to leverage that research and other research to inform.
I think it's helpful towards giving the SEU credit for where it is making those kinds of differences that we haven't previously quantified. I think that would be really helpful.
So, as I noted, the gross savings will evaluation of performance benchmarks. Some of the key tasks are program tracking reviews. So we've gotten access to the FY 2017 SEU program tracking database. We're working our way through it. Essentially, we'll be checking to see that saving algorithms from the technical reference manual are applied correctly, make any adjustments if we have differing interpretations anywhere. And then we'll also use that database to select a sample of representative projects where we'll do a little bit of deeper dive for desk audits. So desk audit is probably a lighter level review for prescriptive measures like clothes washers, air conditioners, etc., where we'll try and get a copy of the application or receipt just to verify that the model is eligible for the program, what the efficiency levels are, kind of do a little deeper dive on those. And then for engineering reviews, this is mostly reserved for the custom C&I projects where there are detailed engineering analysis, potentially energy models developed. We'll gather or whatever documentation SCU has available, and review the assumptions, the analysis approach, do a pretty thorough review to make sure that we're comfortable with the approach and the savings results. Again, these will just be done for a sample of representative projects within the program. On-sites are another task. We will not be doing that this year again because of the schedule. We just don't have time to schedule on-sites and collect the data and analyze it. But we certainly will be a component. So net savings. So this is estimating the net savings induced by programs. So there are some customers that might participate in a program that would have undertaken energy savings actions in the absence of the program. And so what we're looking to do here is to estimate the net savings that are actually induced by the program. It is input into cost effectiveness testing, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. In terms of net savings, we typically will calculate a net to gross ratio and then multiply it by the verified gross savings. So the verified gross savings, in my prior slide, that would be the result from that gross savings verification. The net to gross ratio generally will be used in surveys with program participants. We ask them a battery of questions to try and estimate true ridership. And those are customers or projects that would have moved forward without incentives or technical assistance from SEU. Alternatively, spillover is actions that participation in the program induce the customer to take additional energy savings actions, maybe because they learned about a particular product or technical assistance in some way. So that's a quick overview of what our approach is. This is a pretty standard approach we use for evaluation as well.
Do you know that with and maybe DOE can help refresh my memory? Is this a new approach? Like, we didn't do this in the prior contract, did we?
No, we did this in prior contracts.
Yep,
we did. Okay.
The net value of savings evaluation goes into calculating for the societal cost test and that sort of thing, and it's really important to understanding issues like ridership and spillover.
Oh no, it's
the gross, but the performance benchmarks are based on the gross savings.
So again, because of the abbreviated schedule, this year we'll just be leveraging existing net to gross values that were developed under the prior Tetra Tech evaluation team. In addition, we will be reviewing net to gross values from other neighboring jurisdictions, Pennsylvania, Maryland, et cetera, that can offer similar programs, and use our judgment as to whether some of the prior values from SEU need to be updated or modified based on the so cost effectiveness testing, as we've noted, we will be conducting the societal cost test. This attempts to reflect the core benefits of programs, including the direct energy savings benefits, energy and capacity, avoided energy and capacity costs, transmission distribution costs, fossil fuel costs, if there's any avoided water costs. In FY 2016 evaluation, there was a risk adder, which was included. I'm not sure if that's still included in the current SEU contract. And then here's where the non-energy benefits adder comes into play as well. Then avoided environmental externality costs are essentially CO2 emissions. So it does reflect not only the energy, the primary benefits of energy savings, but also some of the external and non-energy.
Might be
Go ahead.
This might be a question for Ted and others. How did we determine the societal cost test being the primary versus the other screening tests?
It was in the legislation.
It was?
CAE required.
Okay. Did we ever screen for the other tests just for good measure?
No, we haven't done it.
Just curious. Yeah. Kind of benchmark between other jurisdictions. You can see.
And I think that the whole impetus, if I was to speak for the council when it did it, was the intention of showing the larger impact that the DCSU would be having on the district as a whole versus just doing, let's say, the TRC, where we just look at it from the standpoint of the utility savings that are derived. This gets at some of the points that the board were raising earlier, that this work does have health benefits and other ancillary benefits associated with it that are not captured in those tests. That's why we choose to use the societal cost test.
In other jurisdictions, you look at TRC, tends to be a primary one. mostly from a utility perspective is how they're screened. So societal cost test tends to be a secondary or tertiary screener just for good measure. So just from my experience in other jurisdictions, societal is nice to have and you screen it, but you also do other ones to make sure they're.
It's my understanding for utilities, it's not the norm. Is it the norm for other agencies or other SEU-like entities or energy efficiency initiatives?
It varies. Some states use TRC, some use SCT, some use UCT. In terms of other sustainable energy utilities, I'd have to look at it.
And the test is specific to the SEU programs. The societal cost test is specific to these programs. My question then is just how do you quantify that? And particularly since as in DC we have so many programs and overlap, that goes back to overlap. How do you determine what the impact of the SEU programs are on societal costs?
Well, I think in terms of these adders, as Vicki mentioned, there's the non-energy benefits is essentially just a 5% adder. Risk adder at 10%. And some of these other, usually on a per unit basis. So for this is CO2 emissions. So I think a cost per ton of carbon. And so that's applied to the emissions savings for the programs. And so this would apply to all programs with emission savings. Water costs would just be for specific programs where there's anticipated to be some type of water savings. Does that help answer your question?
That helps.
It varies. It depends. It depends on the specific benefit that we're looking at and how we can quantify it best and how to apply it.
That helps because what's important is to make certain that we are quantifying it as accurately as we possibly can. Obviously, you can't do it, 100% guaranteed because it is a societal cost or societal benefit. But at least trying to make certain that it is relatively accurate.
Right. And yeah, in our evaluation, we'll certainly be reviewing the assumptions that go into this. They're reasonable and consistent.
And that's the measure. What are the assumptions? Okay.
Just last note, so we will conduct a scenario analysis with this where we essentially will compare our cost effectiveness testing to how SEU has done it, and then also add in the cost of evaluation, the gross savings verification results, as well as net savings to kind of have different scenarios that generally will reduce the cost effectiveness, but as at least I've seen in the prior reports, the programs have been very highly cost effective. So process evaluation, this again is a task we will not really be deferring until next year, but I do want to touch on it briefly. The goal of this is to examine program design and operations to identify opportunities for improvement. So typically we'd be conducting in-depth interviews with program staff and SEU or key implementation contractors involved in programs to find out how the program is designed, why it was designed this way, what are its goals, are they achieving them, and also to get strategic insight into where the program has been, where it's going, and getting some high-level feedback to help inform some subsequent research. We also do interviews with program partners, so often some of the programs might have HVAC contractors or installation contractors or retailers who are really key partners in delivering the program to customers. And so we certainly would want to interview them and find out about their experience with the program, their satisfaction, what kind of support the program provides, and of course any opportunities for improvement.
Can I ask, are there any almost traditional marketing metrics that you're planning to look at in terms of, retention, who's clicked on the program and looked at it, and if they followed through, that type of, I guess retention would be the right word in terms of usability. Is the SEU kind of a one-stop shop? Did someone intend to buy an HVAC system with a rebate, but turns out the contractors weren't suited to the type of work they were looking to do, so they went with something else? That type of, is SEU filling the role of a one-stop shop? Are they not? Are there people who want to use SEU but have been unable to? That type of metric?
You know, I think we would probably touch on this in the process evaluation, but I think that would largely be captured in, I think, option year 2, we're doing a marketing effectiveness study. So that would be focused on, I think, the issues more closely aligned with the issues that we're interested in. You know, looking at how the programs are being marketed, how the websites are designed, what the marketing collateral looks like. What's customer awareness of SEU? Like, what % of customers are aware? What programs do they know about? How do they know about them? You know, and I think for customers who've participated in the programs, we'll certainly ask some questions about how they learned about the program specifically. The marketing effectiveness is intended to be a broader look at the market.
And also the recognition of whether SEU is spreading knowledge of technologies available, I guess, as in DC as a whole.
Right.
And I'm wondering, are there any kind of low-hanging fruit that could be included this year? Because I know some things, like clicks, that should be readily available data that could probably...
We can give you that independent of this gentleman doing any sort of, you know, extra work. That we can give you that. So
yeah, that's pricing provided in the quarterly report.
Okay.
So if you wanted to drill down further than what's provided in the quarterly.
Okay.
But could I ask, just to follow up, does what you're talking about for year 2 or the Google Analytics that you talked about that you do, are they separate from, or are they somehow able to be factored into performance benchmarks?
They are separate from, I would argue, that they're separate from our performance benchmarks.
So,
I mean, if you're talking about, you know, how many people hit the website, how many people stayed on it and clicked through pages, we don't have a performance benchmark that speaks to that directly.
So again, maybe this is a next year conversation, but in terms of, like we were saying, you know, what were we interested in? And I think that we've been trying to grope for, again, how to look at that as a means to achieving a performance benchmark, or to, you know, leverage your ability to get to X savings. So somehow trying to bring them together, but we don't have the vocabulary or the metrics to make recommendations.
And maybe if we did a small display of what we have, it would help you then inform your thinking about what you might want to ask for next year.
Right, and we're not trying to add extra work.
No.
It's more in making sure we're getting metrics that are helping the SEU be effective with how money is being spent.
Yeah, like
so
I
things
said,
like brand recognition.
these are things we keep now.
Okay.
And so, as I noted earlier, the process evaluation has been deferred until next year, just because of the schedule. Next slide. So, market effects. So, market effects are long-lasting, sustainable changes in the structure and function of the market, essentially where the programs that influence the market towards energy efficiency. And in such a case that if the program were discontinued, that focus towards energy efficiency would still continue. So, there's kind of like long-term changes in the markets. So this was part of the RFP, the market effects study. For this market effects study, we've selected the commercial midstream upstream lighting program because it works with market actors such as distributors and contractors who can have greater influence on the marketplace. And it works with them to essentially change their practices and behaviors. And so it's more likely that this type of program will have measurable market effects than the other programs where the customer gets a rebate for air conditioner. And so as part of this market effects measurement, we would be conducting a baseline study this year, and then we do an end of contract study for 5 years. This study would be done in DC, and we would select essentially a comparison city in an area that does not offer energy efficiency programs. And we'd be selecting indicators of program impacts on the DC market and its comparison city. We would be proposing methods to measure progress on these key indicators. So we measure them. We obviously will be doing performance benchmarking, assessing progress on performance benchmarks. We also will be delivering program level findings because we'll essentially be using the program level findings as building block to roll up and assess progress on the performance benchmarks. Slide. And so here's a quick overview of the schedule. I think for the board, This just looks at this year, May, June, July, August, and September. I think the focus is on the benchmarking report. We're looking at the draft one, the DOE in July. I was guessing that we're finalizing it by the end of August, but once I get feedback from Lance and Marshall, we can talk about how long that process might take to finalize it. But, so we're looking at about 2 months trying to program level reports.
How long do we have after the report comes in?
90 days.
And we might be able to cut the schedule much sooner because much of the review of the draft reports, really DCSCU takes the stab at that because it's really the findings from the evaluator. They will go through it, and if there are any discrepancies, we will try to resolve those. So that can range anywhere between 1 week to 3-4 weeks, depending on the amount of back and forth that's needed to finalize the reports. But if we use the past reports as any measure of what to expect, this can be turned around fairly quickly.
Yeah, I think we probably wouldn't want to shorten any of what goes towards a robust report, but maybe seeing drafts or something earlier on in case there are 90 days is going to take us past January 1st again.
So I think that was the end of my core presentation. I have a few appendix slides with some details that if anyone's interested, we can talk about. But, any questions or items to discuss?
Just sort of from a high level, and again, not to keep everybody past noon, but DOE, because you guys weren't the contractors the last time, it might be helpful to hear if you're, like, what are the novel things that you're bringing to the table as compared to the last one, the last contract. And just my hypothetical was that it used to, as again, the lawyer, and it's all opaque to me, that the acquisition cost and realization rate kinds of metrics were not very transparent for me. And I know from your RFP, there was a lot of realization rate discussion, not so much that I saw on the acquisition cost side of it, and I didn't know if there were any sort of, obvious kinds of metrics you guys are thinking you're employing that might differ or carry on what was going on.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, no, but I think we would be looking at something similar to realization rate acquisition cost, but hopefully we can define it and explain it in a way that's useful to the board. And we could potentially look at other metrics as well.
And that might be the year too. Also.
Right, again, yeah. Yeah, I think in terms of information, I think the market effects area, I don't believe was part of the last contract, so I think that's new. And I think we have a lot of experience with NIs, obviously, a lot of interest in the boards that kind of bring a fair amount of knowledge in the area. Program evaluation.
You haven't already?
We're probably, it's based on some research we've done in Massachusetts, we'd probably pick something in the Midwest, Kansas, Nebraska, some area that doesn't have energy efficiency programs. We obviously have to select a city with similar size, somewhat similar demographics, but also the states, but I don't know if actually it's not as far. Yeah, we have to do a little more.
Use climate zone to, like, generally speaking.
Right, I think we want to take that into account. Okay.
Yeah, this
The DC area.
This is Betty Ann. I'd be careful about using Kansas and Nebraska. Because those are vertically integrated.
Vertically integrated.
And so the role of the utility, per se, and they say that the commission and the city and the state and everything having generation is very different. So I think we would probably get something more useful to us if we chose a city in another restructured state.
Okay.
Rather than a vertically integrated one.
Okay, thanks for the input. Yeah, I mean, I think the issue, part of the issue in using this comparison approach is that energy efficiency programs have expanded nationwide in the last 10 years, so there's fewer and fewer non-program states or areas to choose from, so it kind of limits our options. But we'll certainly, we haven't really started that particular part of the research yet, so I'll keep that in mind.
The other issue is that the DC is unique in many respects because of the demographics. It is, you know, the mileage as well as the urban characteristics. So I don't know how you would find something that is analogous to, you know, a good comparison city.
Boston, Baltimore.
But they have energy efficiency programs.
Yeah. So we're looking at places out in energy.
I was looking, you know, southern states, maybe Midwest, you know. But yeah, certainly we haven't.
Okay.
You know, we haven't made any decisions on that yet, and we'll be looking into it and certainly working with DOE to improve our approach.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just summarize what I think our asks were? Make sure. Thank you very, very much. Thanks for your patience in going through the first hour and a half. But I'm glad we had the discussion because I hope that it was helpful for you hearing the things that we're interested in. Thank you. So I had on my list that we asked for the examples of pre and post contract modifications of the treatment of the total programmatic cost, or the programmatic cost. Before the meeting started, and it could be helpful to add if there are legislative initiatives proposed that we might hear about them, like the NWA analysis that is in Che legislation. Oh, does that ring a bell for anybody?
No, but there is new legislation.
Yeah,
Energy.
it would be helpful to hear about. And then the third thing was I had at least 3 next year questions for Ann and me. Market effectiveness, figuring out how to translate that, I think, or move that into performance benchmarks. Quantifying non-energy benefit impacts, and what kinds of other metrics than realization based on acquisition cost.
Madam Chair, can I add one to the
speak
list?
briefly about the non-wires alternative where we are. The commission is moving on it on 2 fronts. First of all, in our energy infrastructure modernization docket, 1130, we put out the vision statement into that. We've got some rulemaking out with definitions, including on some changes in the approval of generation and those revisions. And that's all just in 1130. And we are in the final stages of selecting a consultant. We had quite a few responses, good responses to our RFP. That will be facilitating the work groups, and one of the work groups, the priority work group, is on non-wired alternatives to non-wires alternatives to new generation, substations, etc. And then secondly, we have before us, and so we expect that consultant to be on probably by the end of the month, early June, and we're still encouraging people to let us know they want to participate in a work group. We'll include electric vehicles and a number of other things also. And we've heard from a number of you actually expressing interest on organizations that you're part of. And hope to Boston Technical Conference is there before July. And then secondly, we have before us, which was filed a number of months ago by PEPCO, a significant, almost $1 billion transmission upgrade, high voltage transmission line undergrounding, and substation upgrades and a new substation at Mount alternative for that. That is due, I think, originally in June. They may have asked for a little extension, but again, before I think. Before the end of June, we will have that before us, and then start a process on looking at that.
Really helpful.
We have a consultant on board for that case, for the full capital grid. Technically, it's called a notice of construction, but capital grid, the project that they want to do, it's about half of it is transmission, where we have siting authority, but not cost authority. Cost on it would be at FERC. And then the other half is 3 substation upgrades, Tacoma, Harvard, Champlain, and then the new substation at Mount Vernon.
Thank you.
So we are focusing on that very much.
Do you remember what case number it is? Mount Vernon.
What is the one? It's FC 1050. There's a technical conference on May the 17th.
Okay.
Energy connection.
Thank you.
There's a disconnection for the larger facility.
Thank you. Thank you very
For
much.
correction.
We would like to understand how the contract amendment for the administration of the SFA grant impacts the benchmark. But for Nicole,
Okay,
because she's not on the phone.
Okay, and I'll clarify with her. She mentioned the DCSU's benchmark.
Is it should not at all.
Right. Still
They're
separate.
They're not tied. They're separate.
You.
All right. Yeah, presentations and everything. I thought this was one of the best board meetings I've been to.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. I had, I was going to
Okay.
You know,
Yes.
we renegotiated.
Yeah.
But it's
Oh.
Yes. So I really appreciate your